Hello everyone. This is Nammernan, and today I will be talking about my completion of the hard mode Dragon Challenge. So, I had a lot of different teams that I wanted to use for this, and I got a replay with each team, but I wasn't very satisfied with the results of two of them, but the last team that I made I was pretty satisfied with. So, let's just start with the first team. So the first team I used, I'll show the replay of it, but it was something like this. It was supposed to be a stall dragon team, and I would use Cyclizar as my rapid spinner. Actually, I think I still have it here. Yeah. This isn't the variant you see here, because that variant had Dragalage. But essentially, the theory was to use this defensive Dragonite set, which is very hard to kill for some types. Mix it with hard to kill mons with Arculodon, defensive Garchomp, Hisuian Gudra with Wish Passing from Latias, and Rapid Spin Regenerator, U-turn pivoting with Cyclizar. And I found that in theory this team should have worked, but in practice it was very, very difficult to maneuver. Mainly due to the fact that Dragon is just not a very good spammable type, with the presence of fairies on almost every single type. So stuff like Poison, which you would think this would be good against, it just doesn't do anything when Galarian Weezing is right there. So yeah, this team is very hard to do anything, or was very difficult to get replays with. It was very hard to win with this team as well. But let me just give like a brief rundown of what I did with the team. So we got a defensive Dragonite here, as I said before. Thunder Wave is used to create forms of pressure, usually speed control, and also Parachance, which Parachance against a defensive team like this could be life or death, so it's very important to have that. Roost allows it to reset multi-scale, which paired with heavy duty boots can make this very hard to deal with. And I chose to make this specially defensive so that it was good against, it could take certain ice-type attacks or take on certain ice-type attackers, specifically the weaker ones. So next bond is Arculodon. This was a late addition. He was not originally on the team, but I decided to put him on here because Body Press. And this move changed a lot. First I had Hard Press, then I had Heavy Slam, but neither of them really gave me results I liked. So I think I would prefer Heavy Slam, but honestly I don't even think I'd have like a Steel move. Maybe I just put Flash Cannon on it instead. But yeah. We did Air Defense, Body Press with Thunder Wave again because Thunder Wave is really annoying. And we had leftovers with Stamina. Standard physically defensive spread, nothing really too insane here. Just this move was not ideal, because you would think on paper Hard Press would be a really good move, but in practice this move is really, really bad because the more power it has more power, the more HP the target has left. This means that it gets weaker when you use it against the target multiple times, which is not good. So this is essentially just a nuke, but it's not even that good of a nuke. Because it almost never, like, especially on Arculodon at least, it doesn't really OHKO anything with that move, so... But yeah, on other months, just a generally flawed move as a whole, so it's very unfortunate that I couldn't use the Garchomp here. I wanted to do a different spread with him, but we ended up doing this defensive spread. This is a very old spread from, I believe, Gen 6. It's a physically defensive spread that makes it easier for him to stomach physical hits, gives him enough speed to outspeed most tanky / slow Pokemon. Specifically those pesky base 70s and a couple of others, like Toxtricity and the like. But with Rocky Helmet and Rough Skin, this thing is a literal demon against triple axle users, as well as other physical contact bonds like Rapid Spinners or U-turners. which U-turn can be an effective strategy, but because Garchomp can just punish that severely, they end up with that and the rocks and spikes that he puts up. In theory, this should just put them in a really tough to deal with vortex. In practice, it didn't really do that because it's very easy to exploit Garchomp's ice weakness as well as fairy weakness. But aside from that, Garchomp was this Garchomp set was actually pretty good, especially on a team like this. But it was just not able to do enough in practice because lack of pivoting and having to hard switch into multiple things is not really ideal for a mon whose role is this. Next is Hisui and Gudra. Hisui and Gudra has Heavy Slam. This is a very standard set. There's nothing really special about this set. I put on shell armor, so I specifically wouldn't get messed up by crits, and it also makes it more, it makes it able to tank hits from Urshifu Rapid Strike a bit easier, since it can't get crit, so if it switches into Surging Strikes, for example, it takes significantly less damage than it would normally. That's really the only use case for it. Besides this is just so I don't get messed up by RNG at all, because your wall getting crit can be really, really bad. But I think any of these abilities could be good. Shell Armor might be the worst of them all, but I just didn't want to get crit, so I used that. Sap Sipper is probably better for this team though, since it will stop a Spore. Latios is a Wish Passer on this team. With Dragon Earth, I experimented with other moves too, or a lot of different sets on Latios. At first, I wanted to do a Stall Breaker set with Calm Mind and Stored Power, but I could never really get that going because of how many things just stop Stored Power and how many things just threaten Latios in general. So I decided to go for a more utility set with Wish and Mist Ball here to lower enemy special attack. And it's also just incredibly, well, it's not super spammable, but it's still it's very good to lower enemy special attack. And Dragon Breath for a paralysis chance. That can't be taunted. And then Cyclizar is actually the star of this team, because it does a lot. Especially for this team specifically. I wouldn't say it's really good on Dragon normally, but if it could be usable, I think it'd be very good. Because the fact that it has a unique combination of Rapid Spin, U-Turn, and Regenerator. So pair this with an Assault Vest, and it can actually come in on quite a few attacks, either get rid of an item, make some sort of progress with a Rapid Spin or Knockoff, and then it can just U-Turn out, and it has Regenerator, so it can just do it again. So it doesn't really need Heavy Duty Boots to not worry about, or it doesn't really need to worry about taking hazard damage that much, because it has the ability to just remove some of that hazard damage and heal it off. So yeah, it was very good on this team, I will say. It's unfortunate that the team still couldn't work, and using this was probably the hardest thing about this team, because this mon is way too useful, but getting it to get those important knockoffs is very hard. And that was the main reason why this team was having such a rough time going, because without a Stall Breaker, it's very hard for this team to pose a massive threat, and it doesn't have Toxic, so it can't put anything on timers either. It's very reliant on just hard attrition and basically constantly forcing switches, which inherently is the reason why this team didn't end up working very well or wasn't very consistent. And this applies to all the variants, because a lot of the mons on Dragon for some reason don't have Toxic. The only one that does is Dragalage, which is why I had him originally on the team. But Dragalage on paper is also seemingly a very good mon, but in practice, it wasn't that great, because I wanted an anti-fairy, specifically specially defensive anti-fairy, because obviously Arculadon can't do that. So I thought that maybe with Arculadon and Dragalage, they could both pose a very good threat to fairy, but the problem is that most of the fairy types in this tier are either they're either neutral or immune to poison, or they're named Hattering, and will just end up threatening Dragalage more than Dragalage threatens it, which is very unideal for something that's supposed to be a fairy check. So yeah, Dragalage didn't turn out being that good. The set I had on it was very good though. It had a let me see if I can make it real quick, but let me just make it the Dragalage set. But the Dragalage set had something along the lines of had Flip Turn, Sludge Bomb as their requirements, and then I've switched between a lot of different moves. I had Dragon Tail, I had Scald at one point to punish physical attackers that would switch into this, because it's one of the few things that still learns Scald, interestingly enough, which is actually quite good, especially for a defensive team like this. But yeah, also I obviously decided to choose between Toxic and Toxic Spikes. Tried both. I ended up liking Toxic more, but in general, the set was just way too passive, and even with adaptability, it still didn't really hurt that much with Sludge Bomb. So I ended up using Poison Point, actually. And Poison Point was a little bit better, but again, it's a contact thing, and most contact moves are usually, with the exception of Draining Kiss, most of them are physical attacks, which this thing is not supposed to be taking. It's supposed to be taking special attacks. So it's a bit unintuitive, so adaptability could have been a little bit better, but adaptability just, I wouldn't say it didn't provide any value, but it didn't provide enough value compared to Poison Point, so I ended up using that instead. And for the item, I ended up using there were two different items I ended up using. I chose between Assault Vest for the non-toxic sets, and I chose a Black Sludge for the other ones. But yeah, I tried my hardest to use this mon with a especially, so I used it especially defensive threat, something like this. But yeah, this mon was just really hard to use, and it just didn't do enough for what I expected it to do, so it's very unfortunate. But yeah, that is that team. And now we go on to the second team that I used, which does have Dragalage, and as I said, Assault Vest set. But this one is the complete opposite. It is a hyper offense team, but it doesn't have any of the S-rank Pokemon on Dragon. So Pokemon I couldn't use were Arculodon, Dragapult, and Hisuian Gudra. And as you can see, none of them are on this team. But yes, the sets for this particular team are actually quite interesting. So obviously we have the standard Garchomp set with a threatening with Focus Sash, Stealth Rock, Earthquake, and Scale Shot to pose an early game threat and to force something to kill it. Originally I had Rocky Helmet, but I didn't want to get one shot in case I was up against an Ice team or an Ice type lead, so I decided to go for Focus Sash instead. Which, this is a set that used to be used back in the day, but it doesn't get used that much now. It usually still uses a Rocky Helmet or Loaded Dice. Dragalage is the next mon on this team, using Assault Vest, as I mentioned before, with Draco Meteor, Adaptability, Dragon Tail, Flip Turn, and Sludge Bomb. Flip Turns are very good on a more offensive team like this, because it can actually switch into a Fairy type attack, force the Fairy type out most of the time, and then switch out with a Flip Turn. Now, as I mentioned before, it doesn't really kill the Fairy types, but it still, at the very least, makes it so that they have to switch out, because Assault Vest makes it tank a lot of Fairy type attacks very well. Like, for example, Flutter Mane does like around 30% to this thing with Assault Vest, which means that it can't really afford to stay in against it. So Dragalage can just Flip Turn or click Sludge Bomb on it, and ends up doing a bunch of damage to it, which is not going to be good for it, especially if it's taking hazard damage, and it has to worry about Roaring Moon, potentially revenge killing it, but yeah. Speaking of Roaring Moon, this set is actually a set I got from my friend Captain Kraken, and I wanted to try it out on this team. This set is a Trapper set that traps a lot of the defensive Pokemon that could normally stop Dragon. from taking over the game. So it's actually more of a defensive Pokemon, surprisingly enough, but it's a very good stall breaker. So stuff like Toxapex, stuff like let's see, a Moongus as well. Like the normal like passive, or not really passive, but like the normal walls that are very easy to abuse with Taunt. You can use a Jaw Lock to trap them, and it keeps them permanently trapped. This is one of the permanent trapping moves. But with Shed Cell, you can actually switch out if you want. So imagine I'm trying to trap something like, I don't know, a choice locked in DD, but they end up predicting my Jaw Lock for some reason, and they switch into Hatterene instead. Instead of me being trapped with the Hatterene and just losing Roaring Moon for no reason, I can switch out with Shed Cell. And that's incredibly good. The other option is Covert Cloak, which allows us to not get, or actually no, it wasn't Covert Cloak, it was a Ability Shield. No, actually I think it was Covert Cloak. So that, yeah, it was actually Covert Cloak because this basically made it so that it doesn't take burn damage from stuff like Volcarona. But yeah, and it would have Roost on top of that, with Taunt to stop them from boosting or stop them from using passive moves, and Dragon Dance to pose a bigger threat with Jaw Lock. You would just spam Jaw Lock, and Jaw Lock has no immunities, so you can just actually spam that constantly. And Roost allows you to not die. But yeah, this set is very good. Or I wouldn't say it's very good. It's very useful though. It's extremely useful especially for this team that I had, which wanted to trap certain threats, get rid of them, so that my big breakers could do a lot. Speaking of which, I have this Dragonite set again. I really wanted to use this set because I really like it. It's very nice on flying, but I want to see if it was very useful on Dragon. It's not as useful. I probably could have used a regular Dragonette Sweeper here, but this set is very good at breaking up flying cores and also just being a menace to Gliscor with Ice Spinner and Roost. So it's able to actually pose a constant threat to stuff like Gliscor, stuff like Landorus, both Therian and non-Therian, to be honest, and be really annoying to ground as well with these two moves. But it also serves as a form of pseudo-speed control, since Thunder Wave slows down most mons, and Multi-Skill allows it to live most moves, so I could have made a better spread that allowed it to outspeed certain things, like base 70s for example, but honestly, I wasn't really, I will admit that I was a bit lazy with that, and I didn't really want to look at what the optimal spreads would be for a team like that, so I kind of just did a 252 and called it a day. But in retrospect, I probably could have invested speed to make it a little bit faster, so that way you could roost in front of certain threats better and wall them more effectively. But yeah. And all of these mons are somewhat passive, but I made up for that in these two, Walking Wake and Latios. Specs Latios is incredibly powerful with Luster Purge and all these other coverage moves. Bolt Beam coverage with Draco Meteor, incredibly strong. Can one-shot a lot of Pokemon in this metagame, or at least 2 KO them. And especially with Luster Purge's 50% chance to drop special defense, it's very lethal. So, or it can be very lethal. So walling this thing is not going to be easy, especially with choice specs. And with all this setup that's being given to it, it's especially with spikes and stealth rock damage, it can be a bit of a threat. And last thing we have is Walking Wake with Choice Scarf. Similar moves, has Hydro Steam for the fire matchup, so that way if they set Sun, you don't get completely screwed. Instead, you actually get buffed, and you end up beating up a lot of the Pokemon. And you also get the photosynthesis boost. I believe you get the you get the speed boost due to the spread. So Volcarona can't outspeed you after a +1. Well, you don't. It doesn't outspeed you after +1 for like +2. So Volcarona is like low, but it's at +2 from something like, let's say, Dragonite. Walking Away can come in on Sun, outspeed it, and kill it with a boosted Hydro Steam. Very useful, very useful. But yeah, that is it for the team, for both teams. I know that was a lot to take in, but I did a lot of testing and a lot of different team structures for this type. A lot more than I was expecting, to be honest with you, but it was fun to try and experiment, and I ended up getting a couple of replays, as I mentioned before. So this replay doesn't really count. I didn't really want it to count, because even though it fits the criteria, this guy literally gave up because I made a really good play. So he Swords Dances, I click Earthquake, he clicks Trailblaze, assuming that I have Focus Sash. He takes a bunch of damage from Rocky Helmet and from Rough Skin. I switch out into Arculodon on the triple axle. Arculodon gets a ton of defensive buffs from Stamina. He goes into Breloom. I click Thunder Wave. I click Body Press. He lives on his Sash. He gets parried, and that's it. Because on that turn, he was going to click Spore to put me to sleep, but because he got paralyzed, can't do that anymore. So, yeah, very unfortunate for him. And this was on my main account, funnily enough, so that was actually quite humorous. But yeah, I feel bad for this guy. It was a very unfortunate series of events. Next replay, this is the team I just showed you. As you can see, this guy is in 1400, so replay counts. You have the Bug Buzz from Yanmega, but it doesn't do anything. Do the Draco Meteor, flip turn out into Roaring Moon. We first get the Taunt out, now we get the Jaw Lock. But unfortunately he has Volt Switch, so he can get out. We put in Dragalage again to take the hit, but unfortunately it is not enough, because Choice Specs Yanmega is very good with Tinted Lens. It would have taken like literally 0 if it wasn't for that, how strong that Mon is. But yeah, we get a Thunder Wave on Cleavor. Cleavor misses Stone Axe, which is very unfortunate. This guy's name is 90% is 50%. Couldn't be more true, especially with what just happened. He gets parried. I put down another layer of spikes. This layer of spikes makes it so that Fortress can't come back in. But yeah, I use Scale Shot to pose a little bit of a threat. I send out Walking Wake to be speed control. We get rid of him with Hydro Steam. Arachnid comes in with Heavy Duty Boots. We decide to put Roaring Moon in here, even though he's sort of at risk due to the fact that he has a Bug Stab move. So I keep boosting, but I realize that this guy is a lot stronger than I thought he would be. So I end up just killing him off. But in comes Latios. We use Thunderbolt. I wanted that to kill, but it did not. But it's still 2-hit KO, so it's fine. Cleavor comes in, but he obviously can't take the Thunderbolt, especially with all the spikes and rocks up on his side of the field. We see the Volcarona come out. Get a +1, we got a crit on it though. He uses Giga Drain, because he knows that he can't use a Morning Sun or anything against me. I send out Dragonite. Dragonite's actually very good against this Volcarona spread as well. Especially with the spread that I had at the time. I think this was specially defensive at the time, but I switched it to physically defensive later. But yeah, he switches in his Fortress, which turns out to actually be Heavy Duty Boots. It was not what I thought it was. But yeah, we end up killing him. We para this guy as well. This team is very cheesy. It's very, very cheesy. We use Earthquake after getting a para. I use Roost to try and recover my HP. He gets parried again. I click Earthquake. And then I click Earthquake again here because I didn't want to play games. We use Roost here, but Dragalage just completely walls this thing, so he can't really do much. So we just slowly chip away at it with EQ. I of course Roost so that Dragalage doesn't die, and I don't have to risk anything with my Walking Wake, especially since it'll take quite a bit of chip damage from the hazards on the field. But yeah, slow and steady, we just killed it. And yeah, that was that victory. Very drawn out victory, but really does show how powerful my breakers were and how the amount of setup I gave them is worth it in the end. But yeah, we'll go on to the last replay, which is this one. This one features Kurum on this team, who was on the team originally because I was trying to deal with flying types, but I ended up getting rid of him. And putting in Dragonite instead, so that I had something to deal with Volcarona. But yeah. Let's load up to this replay against Rock. Rock is not known for being very good, but Rock can still do some annoying stuff. So I started with Earthquake because I didn't want to play games with Glamora, so I Dragon Tail, Ogerpon predicting the Sword Stance, got rid of that, put up Rocks finally. I get Ice Beamed by a Tyranitar. I'm not super shocked that that happened because that is a thing that we used to do back in the day. But yes, he puts up Rocks, I flip turn out, go into Kurum. Kurum is not going to be super useful here due to the fact that it's slower than everything. This is Specs Kurum, by the way. Or, oh no, wait, this is the physical set that I had before. Yeah, this is the physical Dragonite set that I had before. But yeah, it also has Body Press for specifically that mon, and also a few others. But yeah, Ivy Cudgel comes out, knocks out my Kurum. Then we get Roaring Moon in. This is Choice Scarf Roaring Moon, and not the Dragalage set that I had on the other team. As I said, I did a lot of testing and a lot of different variants of my teams. Walking Wake uses Scald. I believe this is the Choice Specs Walking Wake. I don't think this is the Choice Scarf one. Yeah, he lives the Iron Head, unfortunately. Iron Head does more than U-turn there. Get the Lusty Purge off, or Luster Purge off, and Terrakion died because it's Balloon instead of Choice Scarf. But yeah, that would be it for my Dragon replays. It was very, very hard getting replays of this team because, as I said, there's a lot of options, but I was just struggling to get wins. It was very difficult. Very, very difficult, but we did end up doing it eventually. It's very hard, but this was definitely a lot more fun than the last two challenges I did, so I thoroughly enjoyed this. And I hope the next type that we get is also as enjoyable. So let's get rid of Dragon, and let's see what we get next. Ooh boy, we got Electric. This will be a challenge for sure, but I think I'll be up to the task. I'll see you guys next time.